What happens when a billionaire invites his maid to play chess as a joke, not knowing she's actually a genius? Before we begin this incredible story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. We love hearing from you, so tell us in the comments where you're watching from right now. Alexander Crane stood by the tall windows of his mansion, looking out at the city below. Everything he could see belonged to him in some way. The buildings, the businesses, the people rushing around like tiny ants. He owned half of them, or controlled the other half. His reflection in the glass showed a man in an expensive suit, perfectly combed gray hair, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was the kind of man who measured success by how many people feared him. Behind him, Nia Brooks moved quietly through the library, dusting the shelves that reached up to the ceiling. She wore a simple gray uniform, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands moved carefully over the old books, treating each one like it mattered. Alexander barely noticed her most days. To him, she was just part of the furniture, like the chandelier or the marble floor. But today was different. Today, Alexander was bored. He had won his last business deal. He had bought another company. He had made another $1 million before breakfast. There was nothing left to conquer before lunch, and that made him restless. His eyes landed on the chess set sitting on the mahogany table near the fireplace. It was beautiful, made of white marble and black onyx, each piece carved by a master craftsman. He had never lost a game on that board. An idea formed in his mind, and it made him chuckle. It was a kind of idea that seemed funny only to someone who had forgotten what kindness felt like. "Nia," he called out, not bothering to turn around. She stopped dusting and walked over, her steps making no sound on the thick carpet. "Yes, Mr. Crane? Do you know how to play chess?" He finally turned to look at her, one eyebrow raised. Nia paused for just a moment. "I do, sir." Alexander's smile grew wider. This would be entertaining. "Wonderful. Come, sit down. Play a game with me." He gestured to the chair across from him, like a king inviting a peasant to his court. Nia hesitated. She knew what this was. She had worked for rich people long enough to recognize the games they played with those they thought were beneath them. But she also knew something Alexander didn't. She nodded quietly and sat down. Alexander set up the pieces with quick, confident movements. "I should warn you, I've never lost a game. I learned from a grandmaster when I was 12, played in tournaments all through college." He spoke while arranging his army of black pieces. "But don't worry, I'll go easy on you." Nia said nothing. She simply looked at the board with calm, dark eyes that seemed to see more than Alexander expected. "You can go first," Alexander said, leaning back in his chair. "White always moves first. Do you know that rule?" "Yes, sir." Nia reached forward and moved a pawn 2 squares ahead. A simple, common opening. Alexander nodded, almost disappointed. He had hoped for something more amusing, some foolish move he could laugh about later. He moved his own pawn to mirror hers. The game began. For the first few moves, everything went as Alexander expected. Nia played carefully, making safe choices, nothing bold or interesting. He started to relax, already planning how he would tell this story at his club. "I played chess with my maid today," he would say, and everyone would laugh. But then something changed. Nia moved her knight in a pattern Alexander didn't immediately understand. It wasn't wrong, exactly. It just wasn't what he expected. He frowned slightly but said nothing. 2 moves later, she had positioned her pieces in a formation that made him pause. "Where did you learn to play?" he asked, trying to sound casual while he studied the board more carefully. "My father taught me," Nia said softly. "He used to run a chess program at a community center." Alexander moved his bishop, but he wasn't feeling as confident as before. "Used to." The center closed down. "No funding." Nia's voice remained steady, but there was something in it, a history of disappointments she carried quietly. She moved her rook. Alexander stared at the board. Her pieces were working together now, like dancers who knew each other's steps. His pieces suddenly felt scattered, each one fighting its own battle. How had that happened? He leaned forward, his jaw tightening. This was supposed to be funny, A quick game to pass the time before his afternoon meetings. Instead, he found himself actually thinking, actually working, sweat forming on his forehead. Nia sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap between moves, watching the board with the patience of someone who had learned to wait for the right moment. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The room grew quiet except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Alexander's confident smile had completely disappeared. In its place was a look of concentration he usually saved for hostile takeovers and difficult negotiations. He was losing pieces. First a knight, then a bishop. Each time, he didn't see the trap until it was too late. Nia's moves were like water, flowing around his defenses, finding every crack, every weakness. "You're better than you said," Alexander muttered, loosening his tie. "I didn't say anything about how good I was, sir," Nia replied quietly. "You assumed." Those words hit harder than any chess move. Alexander looked up at her, really looked at her for perhaps the first time since she had started working in his home 6 months ago. Her eyes were intelligent, focused, missing nothing. How had he never noticed that before? The game continued, but the power in the room had shifted like furniture being rearranged in the dark. Alexander was no longer the master teaching the student. He was a player fighting for survival against an opponent who understood the game far better than he had imagined possible. His king was running out of spaces to hide. Her queen controlled the center of the board like a general commanding an army. Every move he made seemed to be exactly what she expected, what she wanted. "Check," Nia said softly. Alexander's hand froze over his king. His heart pounded in a way it hadn't since he was young, since he actually cared about winning instead of expecting it. He moved his king to the only safe square left. Nia didn't hesitate. Her hand moved with quiet certainty, sliding her queen across the board. "Checkmate." The word hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Alexander stared at the board, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes could clearly see. He was trapped, defeated, beaten by his maid in his own library, on his own chess set, in his own kingdom where he was supposed to be unbeatable. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. Somewhere in the house, a door closed. Outside, a car horn honked. Normal life continued, while Alexander's understanding of the world cracked like thin ice. Finally, he looked up at Nia. She wasn't smiling or gloating. She simply sat there, waiting for whatever would come next, the same way she waited every day for orders about which room to clean or which errand to run. But something had changed, and both of them knew it. The game was over, but a much bigger story was just beginning. Alexander sat frozen in his chair, staring at the chessboard like it betrayed him. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No words came out. In his entire life, very few people had ever made Alexander Crane speechless. Yet here was Nia, still sitting quietly with her hands folded, having just destroyed his perfect record without breaking a sweat. "How?" The word finally escaped his lips, barely a whisper. Nia looked at him with those calm, knowing eyes. "My father always said chess isn't about the pieces you have. It's about seeing the board that doesn't exist yet. The board that will exist 3 moves from now, 5 moves from now, 10 moves from now." Alexander shook his head slowly. "But you're—" He stopped himself, but the words hung in the air anyway. "You're just a maid. You're just someone who cleans my floors. How could you possibly beat me? I'm a person who learned to think." Nia finished for him gently. "My father, Marcus Brooks, he taught chess to kids in our neighborhood. Poor kids, mostly. Kids who everyone said would never amount to anything. He showed them that a pawn, the smallest piece on the board, the one everyone ignores, can become a queen if it just keeps moving forward." She reached out and picked up one of the white pawns from the board, holding it up to the light streaming through the window. "Every pawn can become a queen, Mr. Crane." That was his lesson, not just about chess, but about life. Alexander felt something uncomfortable twisting in his chest. It wasn't anger exactly, though he wanted it to be anger. Anger would be easier. This felt more like shame, and Alexander Crane didn't do shame. "Your father sounds like a wise man," he said stiffly. "He was—" Nia set the pawn down carefully. "Until the city cut funding to our community center. They said there wasn't enough money, that chess programs weren't important. Dad tried to keep it going on his own, but we didn't have the money either. He worked 3 jobs trying to save it. Then he got sick from all the stress and long hours. Her voice remained steady, but Alexander could hear the weight of old pain in it. We lost everything. The center closed. Dad's dream died, and I learned that in the real world, sometimes a game ends before you can become a queen. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Alexander looked around at his library, at the thousands of books he'd never read, at the expensive chess set he bought just because it was expensive, at the life he'd built based on having more than everyone else. "So you became a maid," he said quietly. "I became whatever I needed to be to survive." Nia corrected him. "I clean houses during the day. At night I study. Business, strategy, finance. Everything I can learn from library books and free online classes. Because my father also taught me that just because the world sees you as a pawn doesn't mean you have to stay one." Alexander stood up abruptly, walking to the window. His reflection stared back at him, but he didn't like what he saw anymore. Behind him, he could see Nia's reflection too, still sitting calmly at the chessboard. For the first time in his life, he wondered what the world looked like from someone else's eyes. "I invited you to play as a joke," he admitted, his back still turned. "I thought it would be funny to beat you easily, to have a story to tell." "I know," Nia said simply. "You knew and you still played?" "I figured you needed to learn something. And teaching is what my father would have done." There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness. Just truth, plain and clear as sunlight. Alexander turned around. "Teach me what exactly?" Nia stood up, smoothing her uniform. "That respect isn't something you can buy, Mr. Crane. It's something you earn. That intelligence doesn't come with a price tag. That every person you walk past without seeing might be the one who knows something you need to learn." She paused. "My father used to say that the most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate, not because they're hiding their strength, but because you're blinded by your own pride." The words hit Alexander like chess pieces falling one by one. Check, check, check. Each statement was true, and truth was something his money couldn't protect him from. "I've built an empire," he said defensively. "I've made billions of dollars. I've won against the best business minds in the world." "Yes," Nia agreed. "You've built a fortress. But fortresses are lonely places, Mr. Crane, and they're only as strong as the person inside them. When you can't see beyond your own walls, you miss everything that matters." Alexander walked back to the chessboard. The pieces were still scattered in their final positions, a frozen moment of his defeat. He picked up his king, the piece that had nowhere left to run. "I want a rematch," he said suddenly. Nia raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I need to understand how you see the board, how you think, how you knew what I would do before I did it." He set the king down carefully. "And because I'm tired of winning games where my opponent isn't really trying. You played to win. Everyone else in my life just lets me win because I signed their paychecks." For the first time, something like a smile touched Nia's face. Not a big smile, just a small curve at the corner of her mouth. But it was real. "All right, but not today. You need to practice seeing differently first. When you look at this board now, what do you see?" Alexander studied the pieces. "I see that I lost." "No," Nia said patiently. "What do you really see? Look at where your pieces ended up. Look at how they were scattered, each one trying to do its own thing. Look at how mine worked together, protecting each other, creating opportunities for each other." Alexander looked, really looked. His pieces were spread across the board like strangers at a party. Her pieces, even in victory, were clustered in formation, a team. You made them work together. Chess isn't about having powerful pieces, Mr. Crane. It's about making every piece powerful by how you use it. A pawn supporting a knight is worth more than a queen standing alone. She pointed to a simple pawn that had protected her bishop during a critical moment. "This little piece, the one you probably didn't even notice, it made my winning move possible because I saw its value." The lesson crashed into Alexander like a wave. How many people in his company had he treated like pawns? How many brilliant minds had he ignored because they didn't sit in corner offices? How many Neos were working in his buildings right now, invisible to him, their potential wasted because he couldn't see past their job titles? "I've been blind," he said softly. "Most people are," Nia replied. "The question is what you do once you can see." Alexander looked at her, this woman he dismissed as just a maid, this genius he'd almost missed completely. An idea began forming in his mind, not the cruel joke from this morning, but something different, something that felt uncomfortable and exciting at the same time. What if I told you I didn't want you to be my maid anymore? Nia's expression became guarded. "Mr. Crane, if you're firing me because I beat you at chess." "No," he interrupted quickly. "The opposite. What if I told you I want to hire you as something else? A consultant, a strategist, someone who helps me see the board differently." Nia was quiet for a long moment, studying his face the same way she had studied the chessboard, looking for traps, for tricks, for the truth hiding beneath the words. "Why would you do that?" she asked carefully. "Because an hour ago, I thought I was the smartest person in this room," Alexander said honestly. "Now I know I'm not. And I'm smart enough to recognize when someone can teach me something I desperately need to learn. You see patterns I miss. You understand strategy at a level I've only pretended to reach. And if I keep ignoring that just because of who you are or what job you do, then I'm the biggest fool in the city." Nia walked to the window, looking out at the same view Alexander had claimed as his own that morning. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "it won't be as your charity case. It won't be because you feel guilty or want to feel good about yourself. I'll do the job because I'm the best person for it. And you'll treat me like I'm the best person for it. Merit, Mr. Crane. Not pity. Merit." Alexander agreed. "I wouldn't want it any other way." She turned back to face him, and in her eyes was the same sharp intelligence that had dismantled his chess game piece by piece. "Then reset the board, Mr. Crane. Let's play again. And this time, let's both play to win." 3 weeks later, Alexander Crane walked into his boardroom with Nia Brooks beside him. The 12 executives already seated around the long table looked up in surprise. They recognized Alexander, of course, but the woman in the sharp business suit, carrying a leather folder and walking with quiet confidence, she was new. "Gentlemen," Alexander said, taking his seat at the head of the table, "this is Nia Brooks, our new Director of Strategic Operations. She'll be working directly with me on all major decisions going forward." The men exchanged glances. Alexander could read their thoughts as clearly as chess moves on a board. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why should we listen to her? The same thoughts he'd had 3 weeks ago, the same blindness he was learning to cure. "Now," Alexander continued, "we're here to discuss the Peterson merger. Richard, you've been leading this negotiation. Walk us through where we stand." Richard Morrison, Alexander's oldest advisor, cleared his throat. He'd been with the company for 20 years and wasn't used to sharing the spotlight. "The Peterson Company wants $15 million for their manufacturing division. I think we should offer 12 and meet them at 13.5. Standard negotiation tactics. What do you think, Nia?" Alexander asked, turning to her. All eyes shifted to Nia. She remained calm, just as she had sitting across from Alexander at the chessboard. She opened her folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper covered in notes. "I think we should walk away," she said clearly. The room erupted in whispers. Richard's face turned red. "Walk away? This merger has been 6 months in the making. We need their manufacturing capacity." Nia nodded. "We need manufacturing capacity, yes, but not theirs. I've spent the last 2 weeks studying Peterson Company's records, the public ones and the patterns in what they're not saying. They have 3 major clients. 2 of those clients are planning to move their contracts to overseas manufacturers next quarter. Peterson knows this. That's why they're selling now, before their value drops by half." "That's just speculation," Richard protested. "It's pattern recognition," Nia corrected gently. "Look at the timing. Look at the industry reports. Look at how quickly Peterson accepted our meeting when they rejected overtures for years. They're not negotiating from strength. They're desperate, and desperate people make bad partners. She slid the paper across to Alexander. There's a smaller company, Hartley Manufacturing, that has better equipment, better clients, and they're not for sale yet because they don't need to be. That's who we should be talking to. Alexander studied her notes, seeing the connections she'd drawn, the patterns she'd noticed that no one else had. It was a chess game all over again, seeing 3 moves ahead, 5 moves ahead, 10 moves ahead. She's right, he said quietly. Then louder, she's absolutely right. Richard, cancel the Peterson meetings. Nia, set up a call with Hartley Manufacturing. We'll approach them differently, smarter. Richard looked like he'd swallowed something bitter, but he nodded. Around the table, the other executives were looking at Nia with new eyes, not the dismissive glances from when she'd entered, but the careful attention you give to someone who just saved you from a costly mistake. As the meeting continued, Nia spoke up twice more, once to spot a legal loophole in a contract that would have cost them millions, once to suggest a partnership approach instead of an acquisition for a tech startup, saving money and building goodwill. Each time, she was right. Each time, Alexander felt a mixture of gratitude and wonder that he'd almost missed this. After the meeting, Alexander and Nia walked back to his office together. The library where they'd first played chess had become their regular meeting space. The chess board was always set up now, and they played every afternoon, sometimes talking about business, sometimes just focusing on the game. You made Richard look bad in there, Alexander said as they sat down. I showed him a better path, Nia corrected. There's a difference. I'm not here to make anyone look bad, Mr. Crane. I'm here to help everyone see more clearly. Alexander, he said. Please, just call me Alexander. Mr. Crane makes me sound like my father, and that's not a compliment. Nia smiled, a real smile now, not the guarded expression she'd worn for so long. All right, Alexander, your move. They played in comfortable silence for a while. Alexander had improved over the past 3 weeks. He was learning to see the patterns, to think ahead, to value every piece on the board. He still lost more games than he won, but he was losing less quickly now. I was thinking, Alexander said as he moved his knight, about what you said that first day, about your father and the community center. What about it? Nia studied the board. What if we brought it back? Not just brought it back, but made it bigger. A whole network of community centers, teaching chess and strategy and critical thinking to kids who need it. We could fund it properly, hire good teachers, reach thousands of kids. He looked up at her. We could call it the Marcus Brooks Initiative. Nia's hand froze over her bishop. She looked at Alexander with eyes that suddenly shone with tears she refused to let fall. You're serious. Completely serious. You taught me that the most dangerous thing isn't losing money or losing deals. It's losing sight of people, of potential, of the pawns who could become queens if someone just gives them a chance. He moved his queen forward. Your father had a dream. Let's make it real. Let's make it bigger than he ever imagined. For a long moment, Nia said nothing. Then she reached across the board and moved her rook, putting Alexander's king in immediate danger. Check, she said softly. And yes, let's do it. Let's teach 1,000 kids what my father taught me. That where you start doesn't determine where you finish. That every move matters. That respect is earned through merit, not given through money. Alexander smiled, moving his king to safety. You're going to beat me again, aren't you? Probably, Nia admitted. But you're getting better. You're learning to see the whole board now, not just your own pieces. You're learning that protecting your team makes you stronger than just protecting yourself. You're learning that the game isn't about domination. It's about understanding. 3 moves later, she had him in checkmate. But this time, Alexander laughed. Not the bitter laugh of a man who hated losing, but the genuine laugh of someone who was learning something valuable. Again, he said, resetting the pieces. Again, Nia agreed, and so they played, 2 people from completely different worlds, teaching each other new ways to see. Alexander learned humility, patience, and the value of every person regardless of their position. Nia learned that some people, when shown their blindness, choose to open their eyes instead of closing them tighter. 6 months later, the first Marcus Brooks Community Center opened in the neighborhood where Nia grew up. 50 kids showed up that first day, eager to learn the game that could teach them to see their lives differently. Nia taught the first class herself, with Alexander watching from the back of the room, finally understanding what real wealth looked like. It looked like possibility. It looked like respect earned and given freely. It looked like a pawn moving forward, square by square, until it reached the other side of the board and became something magnificent. In the game of life, checkmate isn't about defeating others. It's about understanding that everyone has value, everyone has potential, and the wisest players are those who learn to see the genius in unexpected places. Sometimes the person cleaning your floors is the one who can teach you how to truly win. Power without perspective crumbles like a castle made of sand. But perspective combined with respect, that builds something that lasts. That changes lives. That transforms not just one person, but everyone they touch. Alexander learned what many wealthy people never discover. That the size of your bank account means nothing compared to the size of your vision. That a maid with wisdom is worth more than 100 advisors with only money. That the best investment you can make isn't in stocks or real estate, but in recognizing the brilliance in people others overlook. And Nia, she learned that some walls can come down, some minds can open, and some people are worth the risk of teaching. That her father's dream hadn't died when the community center closed. It had just been waiting for the right moment, the right board, the right game to begin again. Every pawn can become a queen. Every person deserves to be seen. Every move in life matters. These weren't just chess lessons anymore. They were truths that Alexander and Nia carried forward, changing their company, their community, and themselves. The game never really ends. It just evolves into something better, something wiser, something more human. And the greatest checkmate of all is the moment you realize that winning means helping others win too. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes to seeing people differently, please like this video and share it with someone who needs this message today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and transform. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from you, and your story matters just as much as the ones we tell. Remember, respect grows where merit is earned, and every person you meet might be the teacher you've been searching for.